Okay, well, I have 5 o'clock on the hour. Welcome, everyone. I'm Christina Henderson, Executive Director of the Montana High Tech Business Alliance. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. It's Tips for Tech Leaders Navigating SBA Paycheck Protection and Grants for COVID-19. This event is the first in a series of free webinars the Alliance will be hosting throughout April and May. You can find the full schedule at mthightech.org/webinars. And we invite you to join us for 2 additional webinars next week. Tuesday, April 7th at 11 a.m., we'll have Federal Resources for Tech Leaders, Q&A on the CARES Act with U.S. Congressman Greg Gianforte. And on Thursday, April 9th at 5 p.m., we'll have Survival Tips for Tech Startups featuring Pat LaPointe from Frontier Angels and Susan Karstensen from Yellowstone Growth Partners. And I would like to thank the Alliance Board and our members for making this event possible. I'm now pleased to welcome our speakers today. Ken Fichtler is the Chief Business Development Officer for the state of Montana, and he'll be joined by Brent Donnelly, District Director for the SBA. They will give a 30-minute presentation and then open it up for Q&A. And during the Q&A time, Ken and Brent will also be joined by legal and banking experts, Barry Johnston with Glacier Bancorp and Erin McCrady with Dorsey Whitney to answer your questions. I will serve as the moderator today, and if you have questions during the program, please type them in the chat box. And I also have a few questions that were shared with us in advance. So I would now like to turn the webinar over to Ken Fichtler to get us started.
Thanks, Christina. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk with everyone about this extraordinary time and what state government is doing to try to help our small businesses not only survive through this period, but also be poised to thrive again in the coming months. So I think, as everyone knows at this point, Governor Bullock has instituted a stay-at-home directive and several other directives that impact small businesses in the state. We've gotten many questions about what businesses are considered essential according to that order, and there's quite a list. I would encourage everyone to navigate to governor.mt.gov/pressroom, all one word, and that'll be a list of all the current directives and orders that the governor's put out. Within the stay-at-home directive, essentially all services that are required to maintain your life are excluded from shutdown. And that includes everything from finishing construction to your grocery stores, your gas stations, medical, of course, state government, police, fire, on and on. And so we think it's a really complete list. We've certainly got lots of questions that have come in about that, but ultimately, it is based on federal guidance, and we're updating that list as we get new guidance from the feds. So it's, I think that's probably the most important piece of what's happening at the state government side right now. That order is in place until April 10th. There is obviously the potential that that will get extended, and we're monitoring the situation constantly, trying to understand the impact that the order has had already, and trying to understand what impact we need to have going forward in order to get the cases in Montana to 0 and to minimize the impact that we're going to have in the state. You know, the other thing that I think is important to mention is that we've got such a limited budget to work with at the state that we're exploring every option for other ways that we can help Montana's small businesses. And so we've got every option on the table, and I'm confident that we'll have some ability to move the needle for some small businesses coming in the next few days. But for now, we're really enthusiastic about what the federal government has done and what the SBA in particular has on offer for small businesses. And so I will happily answer any questions, but I would like to give most of the time for this presentation to Brent to talk through what the SBA has on offer, because I think it's really impactful, and it's really important for small businesses to understand at this point.
Okay, Brent, you're up.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks very much, Christina, for the invitation to spend some time here, and thank you, Ken, for the introduction. I'll start out by saying that there's been a lot happen over the last even hour in regards to the announcements with the SBA assistance. And so we'll do the best we can to navigate through that. But you're hearing some of this stuff as I am, kind of in concert or at the same time. I also will start out by saying that since this coronavirus pandemic has kind of launched, and we've gone through the iterations of the disaster declarations and the different things that we've needed to do to get some of this assistance available to Montana. It's been a really wonderful part of that is working with our state and local partners, our lenders, and really everybody, all the leadership in the state of Montana pulled together in a real quick hurry to get those things declared so we could get to work on this. So thank you to all of those folks, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with those partnerships as we roll this out, because those partnerships are going to be really important to dial down. With the SBA, there's been a huge amount of attention, a huge amount of demand as to a couple of different things that are coming down the pike. So first was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which I'll talk a little bit about that. And then second, what's been highly anticipated over the last week since bill was passed last Friday in Congress was the Payment Protection Program component of the CARES Act, which just this afternoon, within the last hour or so, was kind of launched, if you will. So our lenders and us in the SBA field and all of our partners are going to be getting guidance for that. Some of it's starting to be populated on the websites right now and distributed via email. And I think a lot of that will come overnight and into tomorrow. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. So I'll start to talk a little bit about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, because that has been available and continues to be available for small businesses to apply for some funding. And that funding is a loan with a loan amount of up to $2 million to provide working capital for businesses impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic to help them basically pay bills that they wouldn't otherwise be able to pay as a result of the impacts of the disaster. It's gone through, as many of you on the phone may have experienced or heard. This is a program historically the SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance has available, and it would come into a region or community that got hit by a natural disaster. So those are things that we hear about: tornadoes, flooding, hurricanes, that sort of thing. Congress opened this program up to be used for the virus pandemic, which is first of its kind, and the demand for that was pretty tough on the SBA's IT infrastructure, as in like the website would go down and crash or be really slow, and a lot of businesses had frustration in trying to apply for those funds. Over the past couple of weeks, the SBA has made some good steps, I think, in updating the backbone of that infrastructure. Earlier this week, they relaunched the portal for applications. It's much more user-friendly now. It incorporates some of the components that were in the CARES Act to kind of open up the opportunity for more businesses to be eligible and more businesses to navigate through the program, as well as the option for businesses to request an advance on their economic injury disaster loan of up to $10,000, which is to be paid within 3 days of a complete application. So that was launched kind of Monday afternoon, Tuesday. I have gotten a number of reports from businesses that tried to navigate the old system. They're now able to navigate the new system much more easily. So I guess all that to say is, if you attempted to submit an application through that system and you were unsuccessful, please go back and try again, because it should be, hopefully should be a little bit more palatable experience. Also, if you applied for that program previously, before early part of this week, you didn't have the option to request the up to $10,000 advance. You would have received a letter from the SBA indicating you need to go back and reapply through the new portal to request that advance if that's what you wanted to do. So if you didn't receive that message for whatever reason, please go back and do that if you're interested. We're told that if you do that, you will not lose your place in the queue or your place in line as far as processing your application. So know that. So $2 million loan up to a 30-year term, an interest rate for-profit businesses of 3.75%. Nonprofits can apply at an interest rate of 2.75%. That's available. You can go to the SBA.gov website, just our main website. There's all kinds of links there for apply for disaster assistance, and you can be able to navigate through and find that application. That website, I clicked on that website about 5 minutes before getting on this call. It is changing right now because they're updating that site with a bunch of information for the Paycheck protection plan that was just rolled out. So I'm going to just convert over to, actually, maybe I'll take questions for a quick minute on the economic injury disaster loan, and then we could convert over to the Paycheck protection plan, or I could just present on that and we can do questions later. What would you like to do, Christina?
Pardon me, I shut off my mic. We can take some questions on this element now. I did have one question typed into chat.
Okay.
They said that is the portal here and the link sba.gov/user/login? If so, it doesn't seem to be working. Could you maybe reiterate what the portal address is?
Yeah, just go to sba.gov.
Okay.
And then, so I just went through there. I know they're making changes right now because I clicked on there, but up at the top of this screen, there was the COVID-19 disaster. When I clicked on there, maybe it could even be different right now, but you'll want to go to apply for disaster assistance or apply for a disaster loan. Are you looking at the web now on our website by chance?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm imagining that some of our participants maybe are.
Yeah, let me try to click on it real quick and see if I can pull it up and tell you.
Okay, and we have a few other questions coming in. Again,
Yep.
A reminder to our participants, you can type, we have a cute question and answer box that you can type into, or you can type into the chat.
Yeah, so on the SBA.gov website, right at the top of the screen, there's a yellow banner that says coronavirus COVID-19, apply for an economic injury disaster loan. Click here. If you click that, it'll take you to the application portal.
Okay. We had a follow-up question on the term of the loan. I've read 2 years at 0.5% after 6 months, and then heard 10 years, and you mentioned 30. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, yep. So lots of information out there, some of which has become very confusing, and it's probably going to take a little while to sort all of that out. So this is kind of a good segue, perhaps, to talk about the two separate loan programs. The economic injury disaster loan is separate from the Paycheck Protection Program loan. And so the economic injury disaster loan can go as long as 30 years. Once a business applies for that, their application goes through, they'll work with an SBA loan officer to determine the term, and they try to make the term such that it's affordable for the business. They're deferring payments on these loans for up to a year in this particular case, but then thereafter you determine the term. What the question came and talked about at interest rate of 0.5% and 2 years and 4 years and different things. Those are some iterations of the Payment Protection Program loan, and the 4-year up to 4% interest rate term. I just said my internet connection. The up to 4% interest rate in the term of up to 10 years is what was written in the bill text. And so what's happened since last Friday when the bill was approved, and now as the SBA headquarters has been writing the rules on this, the implementation rules, and making those determinations of where it says up to or up to, what they landed on was just announced this afternoon was a 1% interest rate, which was announced this afternoon by the Secretary of Treasury at a news conference. And I just saw that come through on an email as well, in a term of 2 years. So that's where we are on that particular program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that program when we're ready. If you want to take questions on this, or I can convert over now.
We have a couple more questions that have been typed in. Are taxes paid on the grant?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. If you could capture that question and perhaps email it to me, I would be glad to see if I could generate an answer to you and get it back to you for your membership, Christina.
Absolutely, and we'd be happy to compile all of these questions and the answers and send that out as a resource and provide it on our website after the webinar as well. So folks will be able to access the recording of the webinar, and also we can do a Q&A written out so that people can see some of these answers. And one more question typed in: has the $350 billion approved nationwide been allocated down by dollar limits to each state?
It has not.
Okay.
So as I understand it, it's on a first come, first served basis is what is my understanding of that at this point.
All right, that's all the questions thus far. If you want to move on to the next portion.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the Paycheck Protection Program a little bit because that's what's in all the news headlines this afternoon. It has been for a while. It's first of all, its premise or its design, what it's supposed to do is designed to be an incentive for small business owners to basically retain their employees, keep their employees on board. It's a forgivable loan program for employers that keep their employees on the payroll for up to 8-week period. That 8-week period, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of the knowns that I have based on the bill of the loan program. The guidance on this and the SBA rule, you guys are caught right in the middle of this being rolled out and launched. And so about 20 minutes before this call, I received an email that said that that rule was headed for the Federal Register shortly. So I think it's headed there as like literally as we speak. And so there'll be more information for us and for everybody probably tomorrow. Did you just lose me?
Nope, you're still there.
Okay.
Just a glitch for a moment.
I lost me on my side. That's okay. Couple of things about this that I think are pertinent and important. The bill text talks about a covered period, and that goes back to February 15th, 2020, and up to through the end of June of this year. So that's the window of opportunity. And I mention that because we've gotten a lot of questions at the district office about what if I was a business that was shut down early, or for whatever the circumstance, I had to lay off my employees right away. Does that mean I no longer can take advantage of this or something like that? And it's not the case. Now, you may need to, there's some rules here. You'll probably have to bring some employees back, but you can still take advantage of this 8-week of payroll forgivable loan during that time period. So that's one point that I want to, I guess, highlight for this group. Everybody's situation is different, but that may be important for many of those folks. Another bullet that I guess I would like to say is, hey, who's eligible for this? We're the U.S. Small Business Administration, and many of you know that we have this definition of a small business, which goes by industry classification code. And that for some industries is a revenue measure, some industries is a number of employees measure. The bill text expanded that definition a little bit for the purpose of this Paycheck Protection Program, and it talks about businesses with 500 or fewer employees, unless the typical industry classification code, it has greater than 500 employees, which is the case in like some manufacturing type businesses. That employee number for a small business, it's much higher. So if you happen to be a business out there that applied or tried to apply for a small business administration product in the past and were determined not to be small, I would say take a look at the new regulation or the new rule on this, because you may be able to be pulled into the mix. Also, they get pulled in things like sole proprietorships, independent contractors, other self-employed folks, nonprofit organizations, 501c19 veterans organizations are all eligible. So that net has been expanded a little bit. Okay, jump in here to where can you apply for these funds and how is this going to work? These loans are going to be facilitated through the SBA's network of lenders, so through our banks. It's what I would call an enhancement or expansion of our 7A guaranteed loan program. The government's going to give the banks 100% guarantees on these loans, and the loans are forgivable provided that they're used for eligible purposes. Those purposes that are lined out are payroll, interest on mortgage, rent, and utilities. So the loan amount, the maximum loan amount, there's a couple of different calculations, but for the purpose of this, the simplest way is 2.5 times the average monthly payroll over the prior year period. And so that's how these loan amounts are going to be calculated. A business can go in, apply for a loan, make certifications that they're going to use the funds for the proper purpose. And then if they do that after an 8-week period, their loan can be forgivable. So you apply with your lenders. Our lenders, I will tell you right now, do not have all the guidance that they need from SBA, or I shouldn't say that. They may be receiving it right now as we speak, but that is being rolled out. And I only say that just to make sure that everybody on the call has expectations managed. We've been in touch with all of the banks in Montana, and so they are up to speed as far as we're up to speed. And we're all sort of sitting on the edge of our seat waiting for the mechanics of this so that the banks can make the determination of the mechanics on how they'll be able to process these loans. So yeah, technically, can you go apply for these funds with your bank tomorrow? Yes. Please understand, though, that your bank is going to need a little bit of time to probably digest the mechanics of the SBA process on this and learn that before they're going to be able to implement it. So over the next couple of days, I think that that'll happen pretty quickly, but please just be aware of that. So we've got where can you apply, who can apply. You're going to need good payroll documentation for this. So your payroll tax filings and records, your employee count, their wages, benefits, sick leave, and all of that employment related data, you're going to want to have ready and have that to be able to pull together. What other costs here? I also want to make sure I don't miss something. Vacation, payroll, family, medical, or sick leave, payments for group health care benefits, including insurance premiums, payment of retirement benefits, state and local taxes on compensation. The maximum loan is $10 million under this program for any one business. On rehiring, that question's come up. I'm going to just mention that. And you have until June 30th, 2020 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes you made between February 15th and April 26th. And so I mentioned earlier the covered date for this. If you did make some changes in your employment composition after February 15th, you have until June 30th to make that back up. I am going to, I think stop there on the payment or the Paycheck Protection Program. That's the bulk of what I know. I know that there's 30 pages of regulation that's headed for the Federal Register right now. So I'll probably get to have a chance to read that this evening and start to digest that over the next couple of days. And in addition, I would expect that the SBA will be providing some other information on their website, and potentially some things that we could send out to some of our partners and groups across the state. When and if that comes out, how that comes out, Christina, I'll certainly try to get that to you so you can distribute to your membership.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brent. Oops. Getting some echo. We will make available to the public on our website. We'll keep refreshing a resource page, and when Brent and other folks send us renewed information that can be helpful for everyone in understanding this as it rolls out, you can check that out. So we'll send all the registered attendees on this webinar a link to that page and keep it updated. We do have a question in the chat. Does the PPP cover full-time and part-time employees?
It does. There's a limitation on employees with a salary of $100,000 or more. So there's a $100,000 cutoff. One of the questions I don't have an answer to is, does that mean you can pay on an employee up to the $100,000, or is that $100,000 employee just out? I don't know the answer to that. I imagine it's in the guidance that's being published right now on that, but that is one question. So kind of the question is, if you have an employee that's making $110,000, are they just not eligible to be included, or can we count them up to 100,000 and not the last 10? I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, we have another question, a couple other questions. What if, as a small business owner, I've always taken a reduced salary that's not respective of my title? Can I raise my own salary to a reasonable one with the PPP? That's a good question. My knee-jerk reaction is going to be probably not. It's probably going to be based on historical levels, but again, devil's in the details on that stuff, and I think that a review of the guidance as it comes out will be pretty important. Okay. Another question: when restoring employee levels, will they count FTEs or head count? Yeah, I'm going to need to look in the guidance on that one. There's been a lot of information published by different groups. Law for all kinds of different groups have published information, and a lot of it's come through past me. I've seen opinions both ways, and so the SBA guidance on that's going to be really critical. Okay. Any other questions folks want to type? I'd also like, so we're kind of coming on the half hour. This might be a great time to invite our legal and banking experts, Erin and Barry, to join in. Maybe first I would open it up. We'll begin with Erin. Do you have any thoughts that you might share with the folks on this webinar today? Things that you've been thinking about from your point of view, working at Dorsey and serving clients and trying to navigate and help them navigate all of this?
Hi, Christina, and thanks for having me. So yes, absolutely. And I will tell you, we've just had a flood of questions with, very anxious people, kind of clamoring to get into this loan program as fast as possible. And I will caution everyone, as Brent said very clearly, the regulations have not been published yet. So there will be a lot of additional detail that's coming out over the next, week, maybe sooner. And it'll take a little time for banks and legal advisors and others to digest all of that. But we do expect that some of the questions that are being posed today will certainly be clarified under those regulations. But the one or two things I might just point out, the point of the program, at least in our view, is, to really allow businesses to be able to cover payroll expenses for about an 8-week period. And, the point of the program is, to borrow the funds and then deploy them in a way that you really have 100% loan forgiveness through the program, because you've borrowed them for the appropriate purposes and you've expended them both within the time frame that's required and on the proper expenditures. So one thing to keep in mind is the ways you can use the funds do not line up perfectly with the forgiveness portion of this. So there are ways to use some of the money that will result in you actually not being able to have full forgiveness of the principal amount of the loan. So I would just encourage everyone to be very careful as you think, you're applying for the money, but then are you actually going to be eligible for the forgiveness portion of it? And even if you do spend the funds correctly to be fully, you think they're going to be fully forgiven, if you do reduce your workforce during that time period, during the applicable time period, or you reduce salaries, you can also completely have eliminated your ability to get the loan forgiven. So it's really, kind of the two-step process there. So I would encourage everyone to really be very careful and mindful about deployment of funds. And then the other thing, which we are still getting our arms around a little bit here at Dorsey and Whitney, is when you're counting the number of employees you have, it's a very good question. Is it on an FTE basis or is it on a number of bodies? But the other thing is, of course, there are some rules in the SBA program generally around affiliate relationships and whether or not an affiliate's employees will count towards your total number of employees. So for example, if you have an equity investor who owns 50% of your company, that person is very likely going to be an affiliate. And so if they are, if they themselves are a company, their employees may very well count against your total numbers. And in addition, affiliates of your equity investors could get picked up in that. So we want to be very careful as to how you're calculating that 500 number. I did look at some preliminary application materials for the Paycheck Protection Program, and they do have you disclose in there investors or equity investors who own at least 20% of the company. So it does appear there may be some minority investors that are going to be picked up in this analysis as well. So I think the regulations, Brent, I don't know if you think the regulations will provide some other guidance there, but that's something I think for everyone to pay attention to.
Yeah, I'll if you don't mind me jumping in there for a minute, I agree completely with that statement. I will add to it, and this may complicate it more, but they have come out and say that they're waiving the affiliation standards for businesses that are in the hotel and food service industries. So, and that's under NAICS code, NAICS code 72, as well as franchises that are in the franchise directory. So franchises sometimes came into that kind of under that affiliate bucket where eligibility as a small business became problematic. So there's a couple of areas there that certainly have been opened up. So understanding how that guidance is going to read as related to affiliates in those specific industries, there may be some set-asides there to certainly pay attention to. Yes.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that up.
And I would say, Christina, if I could just add one more thing, anytime you're applying for, first of all, for a bank loan and certainly for a federally backed bank loan, being extremely careful with your disclosure and the representations that you're making in the application materials is essential. It goes without saying it is a criminal offense to have, to deliberately mislead or provide inaccurate information, on a deliberate basis. So I would just encourage everyone to be very careful with the application process and not, I know folks are panicked and stressed and trying to get into the loan program as fast as they can, but just to be mindful of all of that.
Thank you, Erin. We do have another question from the chat. Are restaurants with gaming operations excluded from applying?
I'll take that. So just because a restaurant has a gaming operation does not necessarily make them ineligible. However, the way the SBA programs have across both our disaster loan programs, our 7A, and our other lending programs have a restriction on gaming income that it can't be more than 1/3 of revenues. And so it's that restriction that sometimes becomes problematic for those types of operations. I will say that over the last week or more, I've had a lot of traffic and requests from that industry to see if that is a rule that could be relaxed or modified in some way specific to the CARES Act. And there's been effort by a number of folks to see if we can do that. One of the first things I'll probably be looking at as I go through the regulation as it comes out, because that's been a very hot topic in our office. I think it has in Ken's office too, and I know many others.
All right. I would love to have Barry jump on for a moment. So certainly businesses will want to reach out to their local banker if they haven't already. And we have a number of phenomenal banks that are part of the Montana High Tech Business Alliance that would love to help you apply for this. But we invited Barry, the Chief Credit Officer for Glacier Bancorp today, just to provide kind of the banker's perspective and to maybe help folks understand what he's thinking about, what folks like him are thinking about, and any thoughts from your perspective, Barry.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here and talk to the group. As just noted, the interim final rule just came out, but I have to kind of caution everybody. It's an interim final rule for one. It's going to be facilitated through the SBA administration, and as all of you, I think, are fairly familiar with that organization. Why the rule is out, however, we're still waiting on SBA to come out with their standard operating procedures, and that usually takes some time. So why there's been a lot of press, yeah, you can go to the bank tomorrow, start your application process. Until we actually have the SOPs and we have a formal documented application that the SBA has signed off on as part of their SOP process, we really can't, we can start acting on maybe a draft application, but until we actually have that final application, we cannot process the loans. And that's just, so we're still on a wait and hold until we get that information. And as the other thing that we will be waiting on, even if we do get the application, we are waiting for SBA to start processing loans. Usually those go hand in hand. When the SOP is issued, we can actually take the application, process it, and get it approved, get the loan documents back to you, as long as there's all the supporting documents that are included in the application. And hopefully we can start meeting the needs of our customers and the communities in which they operate in. As probably you all are aware, the banks are going to be overwhelmed by the number of applications that are going to be submitted, given the impact that we are having across the state and in our individual communities and our households. So I'm just going to ask for a little forbearance along those lines. There's going to be a wait. There's going to be some process. It's going to take a lot of time for the banks to process those applications. But we feel, at least at our organization with the Glacier Bank and all of our bank divisions across the state, that we should be able to accomplish serving the needs of our existing borrowing customers and depositors. So we have added additional staff. We've added additional what the SBA calls e-trans sites to all of our banking divisions to get them the resources to get those applications processed and accordingly the applicants their respected funds as programmed or as outlined within the interim final rule. And even the rule that came out, it's an interim final, which is kind of something unique that you really don't see too often. So you can tell that the regulatory agencies are really trying to move quickly in getting the loans approved and the monies distributed as quickly as they can. So just be patient. All the banks will try to get to your applications as quickly as they can. I would just advise you to go to if you have a bank, have a relationship with a bank that can approve SBA loans, that will be the quickest way to get it done because there are some regulatory requirements on the back side of it. So if you already have a relationship, the bank should have a lot of that information that is required to meet those regulatory requirements. And so I would highly advise that you make an application at the bank you already have a relationship with. If you try to go to the bank you do not have a relationship with, they have to go through a lot of extra hoops to supply the information that is needed to complete your application. And from a lot of perspective of some banks, they are prioritizing who they serve first. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So I would just suggest make the application with the bank that you have a relationship, if indeed they can process SBA loans. So that's about all I really have to offer. But
thank you, Barry. That's great. We did have the same question asked by a couple of folks in the chat. So I want to see if we can get this in the last few minutes. What is a reasonable time frame for business owners to expect from a PPP application to acceptance or rejection? And upon acceptance, what's the time frame to receipt of funds?
That's a great question, and it really depends on the workload and the number of applications that the bank has received. We anticipate we are going to receive about 30 to 40,000 applications for all of our divisions across the Western United States, which is a huge amount of applications. And as the program lays out, we have to have all those processed before June 30th, which does give us some time. But the real challenge is, the question is, you know, we are just asking our customers to get in here as early as possible, as soon as the SBA issues their SOP and opens up basically their electronic processing system to the banks as early as we can, and we will try to process them. But that really is a good question. I can't give you a definite answer because it will really come down to how long it takes to process all of the applications and get them done. Once the application is processed, it's a fairly seamless process. There's very little underwriting compared to what we would call a traditional loan or a traditional SBA loan. It's basically a 2-page application with very minimal documentation needed to support the amount of the loan. And I think almost all the industries, through contact with either their accounting firm or their in-house accounting firms or getting documents from their payroll processing taxes, will be able to supply the documentation needed. But again, we aren't even sure what that is specifically because we have not seen the SBA SOPs yet. So, but very short form application, very little underwriting, and once that is done, it'll be processed through SBA. We'll load it onto what they call, what we will be using is their E-Tran portal. We'll get a loan number. We'll get the documents prepared, send out to the applicants, get them to sign them, return them with the information that we need as part of the forgiveness part of the program. There's actually 2 parts. There's the application and funding, but then there's also a forgiveness part that everybody really has to pay attention to and understand that the use of the proceeds of the loan have to be for the purposes which the loan will be forgiven. And there's some specific rules about the 25-75%. Basically, if over 75% of the proceeds are applied to paying salaries of employees for 8 weeks after the date of the loan is dispersed, that the loan can be forgiven in whole. So, but only 25%, up to a maximum of 25% of the loan proceeds can be used for specific purposes, mortgage interest, utilities, that sort of thing. Again, that still has to be specified within the SOPs, but the interim final rule has got a pretty good list of what's allowed. So we got a good idea what's going to happen. But again, there's two parts to this. Everybody really has to pay attention, especially to the second part, and that's the debt forgiveness part. So.
Thank you so much, Barry. We have come to the end of our time. There are a few additional questions in the chat that we didn't have time to answer, but I will pull those out and share them with our panelists so that they can maybe provide written feedback that we could send out to the participants on this call, along with a summary of the other questions and answers that have been provided. And again, we can provide that through email to everyone who signed up and also make it available on our website. I will also remind you that we're going to be talking with Greg Gianforte about the CARES Act on Tuesday, April 7th. So you can ask more questions at that time about other aspects of that bill. And I thank all of our panelists today for being here. I thank everyone for joining in, and good luck to everyone. Stay well, and we hope you'll join us for future webinars. Thanks again.
Thanks, Christina.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.